Minus 20 seconds. 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Okay. Rap your city. Let me see the mic. Rap your city. Give me the mic. Rap your city. I got you. Rap your city. I'm gonna tell you how mine. Rap your city. It's time for us to go live, so rep your city. I really would appreciate if y'all roll with me. Feeling this music cause it makes me wanna step. And if you don't want to, then you lying to yourself. Cause every time we party, we gon' have fun. I don't know about you, but I'ma rep where I'm from. Rep your city. Okay. Rep your city. Let me see the mic. Rep your city. Give me the mic. Rep your city.
Welcome to the RYC Live show this evening. My name is Artistic. I'm your host for tonight, and this is Rep Your City RYC Live Fresh Fridays. And we are back once again with another fresh episode. We do this each and every Friday evening at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So keep up with the latest and the greatest. Keep it locked and loaded right here on the platform. We bring it to you fresh. All right, so we have our backstage guests in the backstage right now chilling. Some of Chicago's finest women in Chicago graffiti art. We're going to get into it, but before I introduce them and bring them to the main stage, we'd like to encourage everyone to share this broadcast, share it to a family member, share it to a friend, or share it to a crewmate. Share it to anyone that you think might be interested in hearing some history tonight and learning the story of these two wonderful artists that we have backstage. So make sure that you also subscribe to our channel on RYC Live, which is RYC Live on our YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you'd like to be a guest on a future show, you can definitely send us an email to ryclive@yahoo.com. That's ryclive@yahoo.com. Once again, you know, this is for us, by us. And once again, my name is Artistic. And so we're going to get right into it without further delay. So we have the founders of the paint wall called Splash, none other than Phina and Bel, too, in the backstage area. And I'm not going to even try to attempt to tell their story tonight because I'm going to let them do it for themselves. So without further ado, let's introduce Phina and Bel too. Welcome to the RYC Live show.
Yo, what up? What up?
How you doing? Wait, let me get my background on here so we can look fresh and be in style. Let me see here. Hold on. Wait. I got my my director who has made us a fresh background. Bam.
All right. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me send a shout out to Lady Gemstar. I see you checking in the building, Lady Gemstar.
Hey, Gemstar! What up?
Yeah. So, welcome to the RYC Live show. I thank you, ladies, for coming on, taking out, a little portion of your Friday evening to come spend some time with us. And so we're super excited to hear your story. This story will be documented and it will be available for anyone to tap in. If they don't tap in during this live broadcast, they'll be able to click on the link and watch this interview in its entirety. And, for whatever, at any moment or time in the future that they want to learn something that or remember something that you might have shared, they can always go back and watch this at the very beginning, from the beginning to the end. So just keep that in mind as you talk. This is really kind of like helping create a moment in time that'll be frozen, that'll be accessible to everyone that wants to know about what you two ladies have done, what you're currently doing, and what you're planning on doing in the future. All
Hey,
right.
sounds good.
So let's go all the way back to the beginning because I'm a historian and I love history, especially hip hop history. And I always tell people it's nothing like like where we at today is important, but we don't become who we are today if it wasn't for the things that we did in our past, right?
That's right.
Even if it was an accident, it's still important because it happened.
Yep, yep, yep.
And yeah, and that's what leads us to becoming who we eventually become. So for you all, what was it? This is a question to each of you. What was it that influenced you to want to get into graffiti?
Damn, for me, I guess it was really just seeing more so my brother's letter styles when I was growing up. I lost my brother at a really young age, and so I felt like that was kind of something he left behind in a way. And
Mhm.
seeing letter structures in his notebooks and tags and stuff like that kind of got me interested in just kind of like the love for letter structure and messing with letters.
Mhm.
And I think that after just kind of seeing that, after a while, it was my form of like kind of connecting with my brother in a way.
Okay.
Later on, though, I started learning more about graph. At first, it was more so like the love for letters. And but later, I started making a connection like, oh, there's actually a name to this, right? It's graph, it's graffiti. And so I think for me, that's really what grew or sparked my interest for graph was just trying to create a connection with my brother. And eventually that grew into like just getting up and staying up. Like that was my main goal.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. Interesting. So you had a brother that was writing.
Yeah, he was about 14 when he passed. And around that time, I think he was like dabbling into graph. Um, After he passed, we had some things left around, like we had notebooks and stuff that we kept of his. And in those notebooks, he had a lot of different tags, and just going through I liked what they looked like. They had like it was just nice, a flow of letters. It was something that kind of it grew my interest into kind of messing around with letters a little more. So I don't know how deep he messed with it. I'm not too sure. I know him and my cousin did a few tags here and there, but I don't know to what extent. I was around 7 when all that happened. And so for me, at 7, I was just kind of like seeing these letters and seeing them warped in different ways than I was seeing them at school. And that to me was like, damn, this is cool. Like he's got this really cool flow with letters. And so as I started getting older, when I got into high school, that's when I started seeing more of the graph scene. And I started thinking like even meeting more writers and seeing like, oh, there's actually a name for this. So getting more into the scene when I got into high school, that's really when like the whole graph part came together for me.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. Okay. And how about you, Fina?
For me, it was something that was kind of like alive and breathing in the neighborhood when I was growing up. There was kids, guys on the block who were doing it, and I had an older brother as well. He was doing it as well, and they would come over and just I would like sit there and watch them just like bust tags on their notebooks over and over, like filling pages up with like the same tag over and over again. And I just kind of like it intrigued me and it made me want to come up with my own tag and kind of like I started doing it on my own, when they weren't watching and stuff. And, little by little, they started noticing that I actually had my own tag at some point. And they started letting me in a little more in the circle and kind of like teaching me like a little thing or two, about what they were doing and how they were back in those days. They were making homemades, with the erasers from, back in the day, and the Griffin from Walgreens that they would rack. And so they were teaching me how to do all of that. And it was just so exciting because in my neighborhood, it was either you were just kicking it at home and not really like interacting with the outside world, or you were like gang banging and getting into trouble. So this was like another outlet for us, and it was exciting, it was new, and it was interesting, and we all were like trying to figure out different styles, different ways to come up with markers, and yeah, it was a dope era for sure.
You know, it is so interesting to hear both of you all's perspective because I didn't have an older brother, right? I'm the oldest sibling in my family. I always wanted an older brother, right? But just that I was the older brother. so so as I was coming up, I had to pretty much learn from trial and error, or the my other friends and or peers that was amongst me at the time. So that's kind of cool to know that right within your family there was an influence. You know what I'm
For sure.
saying? You know what I'm saying? So that's super dope because that gives you a head start even before you hit the streets. You know what I'm saying? Because you got it right there in the family.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, it was my house was definitely one of those places where um all the crews from the south side, like anybody would come through, and we would just kick it outside of my house. There was like steps that we would all just chill at and sketch and hang out. We used to go to raves, and it was a fun time. It was a fun time.
Yeah, that's dope. That's dope. Okay. Well, all right. So what high schools did both of you go to?
Did you go to Curie too? We actually both went to Curie.
Oh, okay, okay. Curie High
Yeah.
School. Okay,
I graduated in '97 though, and
I'm
um,
05, class of 05.
okay. Now, at the time that you attended Curie, was there other writers at the school during the time you were there?
Oh, I feel like Curie was a big time school with the writers for sure. It was
Okay.
all sorts of stuff going on at Curie. You had party crews, you had gangs, you had all sorts of cliques, and definitely the writers. We were right off the orange line, so that was our home, right? Like so. Um, that's definitely where I got to know a lot more writers coming into freshman year at
Okay.
Curie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, same here. During the '90s, it was definitely heavy with writers and crews, and yeah, definitely big time heavy with the writing.
Wow. Wow. Okay. All right. So, and you say that was right off the orange line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. So, and that was actually the orange line was fairly new at that time, correct?
Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure. Yeah, yeah, it was a whole thing where they were like promoting the Orange Line and like letting like graffiti writers like do their thing. They did like a whole thing. I was still kind of young when that happened, but yeah, it was definitely a whole thing when the Orange Line came up. They were trying to like include like writers and stuff.
Yeah. I think you got in on that, right?
Yeah.
Artistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was there when they first introduced the colors
Oh.
because when we were writing in the '80s, the lines was not color coded like that,
Hmm.
right? Like in other words, the blue line used to be called the Congress Douglas line,
Yeah, yeah, I
right?
remember that.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So in the early '90s, when they switched over and color coding them, like the red line, the green line, the blue line, the purple line. It was like, oh wow, what is this? So it was different. But I remember when the orange line was spanking brand new. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like, uh oh. Yeah, because in my day I came from what is now known as the red line.
Okay.
So back then it was called the Lake Dan Ryan. and
Okay.
and it used to run from 95th on the south side. It would go down to the Loop, and then it would go west to Harlem.
Oh, word. Okay.
Right, right. And this is before they made it go northbound because after they changed over, it started running from 95th. It would go to the Loop, and then it would go north to Howard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but it was called the Lake Dan Ryan back then. So, but today
Dang.
it's called the Red Line.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just interesting, and that's why this is all important because everything changes over a course of time. You
Hmm.
know what I'm saying? And I know, like, and that's why I want to get you all's perspective because I know for us, the line was our way to communicate, and high school was a lot of our grounds where we actually met and formed.
Yep.
You know, so let's talk a little bit about that because I feel like community is also another important role based on us getting to know one another and forming friendships and crews and things of that nature. And again, like we're talking like the '90s, that was a whole nother new what shall I say? What's the word? A new decade. And so everything was changing. You know what I'm saying? In the 90s. And in fact, even in the 90s, they started messing with us with the spray paint. You
Mm.
know, banning spray paint, and you know, to the point to where it wasn't being sold in the city no more, you know.
Yeah.
And then I don't know if y'all was aware, but then the CTA even came together to try to, you know, reduce the levels of the art being done on CTA by creating this program for the artists to paint on the walls at the stations and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was called a CTA competition.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yep.
I was too young for that, but I've definitely seen the flicks. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I've heard
yeah.
some stories. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful time. It was a beautiful time, and you know, of course, everybody had, you know, certain ways that they felt about it, but I participated in that, and we had a ball. I mean, it was the first time that a lot of us was able to get spray paint for free,
Mm-hmm.
and then allow us to get a space. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? To do a whole crew, come with your whole
Yeah.
crew, like.
Run that.
Yeah, it had
Yeah,
to be surreal for sure.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. That was beautiful, and yeah, and I was right there, not only participating in the paint session, but we was also documenting it. So because it was epic, it
Yeah.
really was. And then to go around the city and just look at everybody's stuff. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I wish I could have been there to see that.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about and then also too. That was when the buff started becoming
Yep.
real popular in the 90s.
Mm.
Yep.
You know, where they start buffing all the walls, making them brown.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was horrible.
That
They
was.
were on it too.
Yeah. So let's talk about crews. So like, what was y'all first crew that y'all got in?
Well, for me, it was like a all girl crew when I was still in middle school, but they were like high school girls, and so yeah, it was an all girl crew called PMS, and
Okay.
it stood for Proving My Style.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, it was definitely fun because I was the youngest one on there in the crew, and I felt pretty, like welcomed by them, and it didn't last very long. I started kind of like going out with my homies that lived in the neighborhood more,
Uh-huh.
and so we started kind of forming. They had already formed the crew. They started a crew called KCM,
Okay.
and at first they used to stand for like Can't Catch Me or Kids Causing Mayhem, and so that was my like my brother's friends. They had started that crew. My brother was not in that crew
Okay.
at first, and so little by little, I started hanging out with them more and more, and they ended up recruiting me, and the rest is history. After I turned KCM, I just stayed KCM.
Wow. Wow. Okay. All right. How about you, Belle?
So I was meeting new writers when I got to Curie, and at one point I met a few members of BTB crew, and so they ended up kind of staying in the same area I was by, and started hanging out with a lot of them. Eventually turned DCU, which was their sub crew, um, and kind of repped that for a little bit. That was really like my first kind of like exposure to like the whole crew thing, hanging out with crews and all that. I remember hanging out in Chaos's garage and them teaching me how to do like toss-ups and quick throwies and how to do this and that, And eventually after that, uh, at Curie freshman year, I ended up meeting her sister, and she introduced me to the neighborhood and to KCM, and she'd see me posting tags in my notebook and just kind of keeping to myself. And she's like, "Oh, you do graph? My sister does graffiti." And like you said, during that time, you didn't get to meet a lot of women that were doing graph. Social media wasn't up like it is now, and so to hear that there was another female doing graph and all that, I kind of lured me more into like this friendship with her. She was real chill and cool, anyways. So I started hanging out with her. She introduced me to her sister Phina, to her brother Jedi, and to like the whole scene around their house of what Phina was talking about earlier. And eventually I also turned KCM, and I've been rocking KCM forever, for life.
Nice, nice. That's what's up. That's what's up. That's what's up. Wow. So let's talk a lot. Let's talk about the the idea of women in this more male dominated space. What were some challenges for you ladies, if any?
You want to go first?
Well, for me, I used to go out and bust tags a lot by myself. It
Uh-huh.
was something that I felt I strictly had to do because, and this was starting up, right? This was when like I didn't really know too many riders. I hardly knew where to get gear. But I knew that I wanted to start getting my name up somehow. So for me, it was more so about them not knowing that I was a girl, but more so recognizing my tag. And at
Mhm.
some point that popped off. I was getting up a lot, and eventually then I would meet the guys. But I feel like for me, my challenges were more giving me my props as a woman. So
Mm.
some of the stuff that I would hear came from a good place, I feel like, but maybe didn't come out as best as it could have. Um, One comment in particular was like, we had just painted this wall. I guess my piece was kind of fresh or so, and I got a compliment saying, "Dang, you paint almost just as good as a guy." And so to me, it was like, damn, I'm being compared to a guy, but why? Like, this is my style. I'm doing this. And
Mhm.
so I knew they were trying to give me a compliment, but it was more so being compared to the guys and stuff like that. Um, I try not to rely on too many like guys when I was coming up. So I try to figure out where to get my own gear, make my own gear, come up on whatever. I definitely knew a lot of writers, and especially because they were getting up and I looked up to a lot of them, and so I feel like that motivated me a lot, but I tried to stay away from too much of like hanging out and stuff. So I don't think I had too many crazy challenges. I mean, getting a spot on a wall sometimes could be hard just because you're a girl. Not so much so any now, but before it's kind of like one of those things where you have to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd say maybe some of those were a little hard.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How about you?
Yeah,
Tina?
I would agree with that. I want to say, for sure, like just having to prove yourself and making sure that like nobody had to kind of like hold your hand and like worry about you when you were out. If you got chased, you got chased, and you had to be on your own. And so like just making sure that the guys knew that you could handle that kind of stuff, because it was always like you didn't want them to feel that like they were looking out for you or they had to take care of you in any way. So it was just getting over that hump of just them realizing that and then just moving forward from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right. So now let me ask you ladies this, and be honest, but what does it make you feel like, or how did you feel, or what do you feel when you're out there on the mission? Like what's going on with you in your mind, your body, your spirit, like, and can you describe it?
For me, it's a definitely the adrenaline, right?
Okay.
But it's
Okay.
also a sense of freedom.
Okay.
Like everything is so restricted to the public, right? You can't go past this fence, or you can't go here, you can't go there. And so like just being a writer, exploring the city, getting to know the city, and getting up at the same time, and being in like areas where you're not supposed to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's like liberating in a way. It's like stepping out of this whole system and getting up. And for me, ultimately, the end goal was always that, again, social media wasn't up and popping, right? So it was like, if somebody told me they saw me up, that meant a lot to me, because it was like, okay, they were over here by this or wherever they saw me, but somebody saw what I did, whatever night that was. And so it was very rewarding, but also, yeah, just being out at night when most people are like sleeping and you're out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Just pulling these missions with your squad is always really like rewarding, and it just makes the bonds tighter, and just like um planning the missions and like it's all part of the game, and it's all like part of like how you're gonna pull this off and how you're gonna pull it off clean, and so I think that a lot of that is very like that's all part of that like adrenaline, and like part of the mission. It all gives you that adrenaline, the beginning to the end.
Okay.
And so it's just finishing it up and finishing it clean, and just getting to go home and waking up the next day and looking at it in the daylight.
That's probably the best part when you get to your bed. You're like, oh shit, I made it.
We did it.
I can't wait to go tomorrow.
Right, 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 right. So, have you had any pushback, you ladies, from just participating in this art form? Because most people look at it as, most of the outsiders in the world look at it from a negative perspective,
Hmm.
and most people don't consider it an art form, right? So, did you get any pushback from family or friends, community, in terms of you all participating in this art?
For me, not really. My parents didn't really know what I was doing. My family didn't really know either. Um, eh, Friends were doing it also. So,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I didn't really get a lot of pushback on it. Even as I started, as like at some point I told my parents, because I was like, you know what, if I get arrested and stuff, I want to be able to at least call my OG if I need anything. And
Mhm.
so for me, being open with them was important. And they were very understanding too. They didn't really understand exactly what I was explaining that I did, or like how illegal it was, but they just knew I really loved to make art. And so to them, this was like another art form that I was dabbling into.
Okay.
Um, but I didn't get even when I started painting, just like getting up and with the crew and all that, I didn't really have a lot of pushback. I'd say, if anything, I got a lot of it was a lot of good vibes for me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely at some point, you get little comments here and there, or but it was never a constant for me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got a little bit of pushback since my brother was already doing it, and he was kind of getting a little bit of in a little bit of trouble already himself. It was a big thing with him. He would definitely like try to keep me, like at a certain like this, like, yeah, you could bust tags on paper, and you could bust tags like in the yard and stuff, but you can't be out, going out there because I'm already going out there, and whatever. So like for me, it was definitely like I had to definitely work around all of that, and like start like just getting like my own partners to go out with, and like sneaking around not only my parents but my brother. And so there was definitely a lot of that because we were hanging around with the same people. And so a lot of like I would go bombing with some of the boys, and then he'd find out about it later, and then he'd like like snap at them, and then they'd be like, oh well, I can't go with you no more. So it was like definitely always like that, like I gotta figure out who is the next person that's gonna be down to go with me, like.
Right.
And so sometimes I would have to just do it on my own, just bust my own little tags here and there, but definitely a pushback because of that, because there was already like a person in the family getting in trouble, and my parents were already stressed out, and yeah, so there was definitely a lot of that.
Wow. 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 It is so, people have no idea, I used to get quite a bit of it, especially from common folk, but family too, my mother, various family members, I used to always hear this: you're gonna go to jail,
Uh-huh.
you're a vandal, it's not real art, go get a real job. Stop writing on my garages or people's garages. Like it's just like yeah. And when I used to introduce myself to just people that I would meet, and I would, I didn't like to hold back with letting people know what it was that I love doing. And so when they would say, well, what are some things you like to do? And when I would tell them I like to do graffiti, they'd be like, they look at me like, huh? Like that's vandalism. That's not art,
Yeah.
Like, okay, whatever,
Yeah. Yeah, it was definitely looked at as vandalism. It was definitely like very very like punitive when you'd get when you'd get caught doing it. There was a whole squad. Wasn't it the bombing squad or something that was like out there back then? And if
Yeah,
you did bust a tag on a wall, it'd get like buffed right the next day. So
yeah,
it was definitely a challenge for graffiti for a while to just keep it alive here in the city.
right.
And just like there was a lot of people like just not doing it anymore, and growing up like so,
Yeah, yeah,
at a certain point people start looking at you like you're still doing that.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it was tough like keeping it going and just knowing that, hey man, this is just my passion and my therapy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Chicago was trying to not allow the city to become like New York,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the writers in New York, they owned the city back
Yep.
in their time, right? They owned it. The city just had they didn't have a hold on them, right? I mean, they was painting trains and stuff in broad daylight. You know what I'm saying? Like just because who's gonna mess with them, right? But in Chicago, when it started to arrive here, even though we're some years behind New York, the city didn't know how to react. So we did have a hold on the city for a little bit. Back when we had the mayor Jane Byrne in the early '80s, and then when she left, we had Mayor Daley. And yeah, he hated it. He despised it. He was trying to come up with all type of campaigns to get rid of it. I remember I would get on a train sometime and see a advertisement talking about report vandals, report. Here's a
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah. And we used to take them signs down and collect them. report graffiti.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you.
right. It's souvenir.
you know but Chicago, and what they would do is, especially trains, they would take the trains out of service, so that they could clean them. See, in New York,
Yeah.
they trains ran all the time.
Mhm.
They couldn't afford to take trains out of service because they had to service the city.
Right.
So but here, since we wasn't as bad, soon as stuff was done, it would be taken out of service so that it could be cleaned
Mhm.
and then put back on. At one time we had caught some wreck. We had caught some wreck where trains did begin to run because it was, like, obviously you can't keep all the trains out of service because how you gonna communicate?
Right.
How you gonna commute these passengers around the city, right?
Yep. Yep.
Then Chicago also became known for rooftops. you
Hmm.
know. So you get on the elevated part of the train and you will see, if you go up north or you go on the west side, you will see all these rooftops painted. And that became one of our signatures. When you talk about Chicago writing, you got to talk about the writers that was hitting the rooftops,
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
yeah, but I do feel that, at one point they didn't know what to do until they, like you said, until they did start putting together squads to kind of like combat it.
Hmm.
And every time
Yeah.
a writer got caught, that was more information for them to get more acquainted with how we moved and where we did what
Right.
we did, so that they can try to reduce it. You know,
For
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
They were doing their homework. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So let's actually take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to get into talking about style. I want to
So
talk about that. But we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back. You're watching the RYC Live show, and we'll be back in a moment. All righty. Welcome back to the RYC Live Show. Yeah.
Yo,
So,
yo. What up?
yeah. All right. So let me go back here. Put my background back on there. There we go. All right. So let's talk about style because I feel like when we were coming up, style was very important. And obviously it's still important today, but it was so much important, so much so that you was considered a toy, what we called a toy. You know what I'm saying? If you couldn't tag, if you didn't have a great hand style, and this is before you even got to the letters, right? Because the
Yeah.
letters come from your tag, right? So you had to have style in your letter, like, and then picking a name was also important too. Like my name was super long, right? And sometimes I would write art for short, ART, but
Mhm.
I had 8 letters in my name. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of people used to get on me because like, how you gonna use that? That's they're gonna be at you before you even get to the last, halfway through your letters. You know, but there was something about I like the way the letters worked because
Mhm.
obviously when you pick a name, you gotta tag it out, write it out. You know what I'm saying? Before you know you decide whether or not that's something you're going to use.
Right.
So I like the way that the letters work together, and that's what I would practice a lot on when I was writing in school and at home and stuff like that. And so, but like I remember just taking a period of time to try to develop the way the letters looked on paper,
Yeah.
and and it's and somewhere down the line I ended up getting comfortable, but in the beginning I was kind of like, I don't like the way my stuff looked, because I would look at other people's stuff and I'm like, oh, I like the way you do your S's or the way you do your R's, and I'm like, that's dope.
Mhm.
And so before I even tried to apply the stuff to the wall, I wanted to make sure I was comfortable with what I did on paper. So what's your definition, like, and how would you define your own style? Like how, if you had to define it, what would that be?
I'll go first. Well, my name I feel is kind of long too. I have 5 letters in my name, so it's always been kind of one of those things where it's like, well, why don't you spell it with an F? And so like, I've tried it with an F. I just don't like the way it looks. And for some reason, I guess I'm just stubborn. I just know that it's more of a challenge, and so I stuck with the PH. Um, and I think that my style is just like 90s style, I guess. Like you just kind of do your quick little whips, and you're done and on to the next, and so that's kind of what I guess my style would relate to, is just 90s quick, get it done.
Okay, 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 okay.
um. Yeah. It's. I don't know. I've had this question before, and I usually never know how to answer it. But yeah, I feel because I started off the same, feeling the same with my tag, just not really liking it at all. That's also part of the reason I didn't want people to know who I was. 'Cause I was like, man, my tag's so booty. But after a while, I got more comfortable with it. But I guess I don't know, like it's only a 3-letter name, so I don't get too complicated with it, but I do try and have a nice flow.
Yeah.
Um but yeah, I guess like curvy, I'd say, if anything, like, yeah, a little wild, but not that wild style.
Okay.
Um, but bold.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna pull up this picture that you all did together, and so we can talk about it, right?
Yeah, super old. What was the name of the jam, man? Jamstar. Jamstar put this jam
Yeah, I still love
together.
her.
I
The
still love
I love
still,
her.
her.
the I Still Love Her event, right?
Yes, man.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was actually my first time, like straight out, like I had just had my kids, and it was my first time painting after becoming a mom.
Okay.
And that's actually the first character I ever painted, like, on a wall.
Okay. So you did the character, the B girl.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Nice. Nice. And what about I see the silhouette characters on in the background on the left and the right side, and even in the back.
Yeah, that was we did a pretty good job of dispersing
The duties.
the duties. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but that was also the first time that we painted with the all girl lineup as well.
Yeah.
And that was super dope. Just the fact that they had put that wall together, that Jem went and like somehow connected with all these women, and put us on there it was a really dope experience. It was nice to see like a lot of them at the same spot, just getting down. Everybody was flexing, so it was a nice time.
Yeah, it was definitely dope to see all the women in the same space, and I want to say that probably sparked like the need to like want to see it more.
Yeah. Now, Bel, I noticed that you use a 2. What did that represent?
Well, when I was in my freshman year of high school, my name was given to me. To me, that was a big thing. Was in graph. I felt like most of the time your name was given to you, and so I'm not gonna say that was the case all the time, but in this case, as I was meeting these writers, different writers, they see that I was busting different tags. I still didn't know what name I wanted to write. But I had maybe like 3 I was shuffling around. And again, I didn't know a lot of writers. I didn't really I wasn't traveling the city too much at that point yet. I started shortly after that, but at that point I still wasn't aware of like who else was writing on what side of town or whatever. And so the names I had picked were already names that were up and getting up, and I wasn't aware of that. So my homie was like, you should write Bella. And I was like, nah, being self-conscious. I didn't want to be called that. In Spanish, it means beautiful or pretty. And so, being young and still growing into myself and getting comfortable, I was like, I don't really like that. And he's like, just drop the LA and write Bell. And so I would started practicing the letters, see if the letter flow was good, if I liked it, if it was comfortable. And I started to really like the flow. Bell. I started tagging Bell on all my shit. Bell, Bell.
Yeah.
Eventually, I started taking that to the streets. And so when I started getting up on the streets, I was getting up a lot more. And so that's when I started getting actually, that is maybe one of the pushbacks I got, was the fact that my name was from an old school Bell. And Bell got up hard. I never, at that point, I didn't travel to the north side too much, but I know that not just the north, he wasn't just getting up on the north side, but that's mostly where you would see a lot of his stuff.
Okay.
And so I was unaware of this, right? And so by this time, maybe junior year in high school or something like that, that's when I started getting a little bit more of like, yo, there's an old school Bell. There's an old school Bell. And so I started throwing in the 2 on there.
Gotcha.
Out of respect for him,
Gotcha.
But yeah, that's where the 2 came from.
Okay, that makes sense. And yeah, that was definitely a challenge. That was definitely I think just a general writer's challenge, coming up with a name that wasn't being used prior, right?
Yeah, and I really didn't want to put a 2. Nobody wants to be second place. You know what I'm saying? But at that point, I had got up so much that it was hard for me to just be like, I'm just gonna let it go,
Yeah.
And so I had different conversations with people in the scene during that time. And at one point, I had a conversation too with a homie who mentioned that old school Bell knew that I was writing Bell, and that one of the comments that he made was that, if anything, he was happy that name was still getting up, and that it was even a bigger deal that it was by a girl.
Yeah.
And so to me, although I didn't hear it from him, I don't know how much of that was real. It still kind of motivated me to just keep getting up.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think, like, again, nobody could ever know. Even if you did the research, you're still probably going to be missing points and things of that area.
And we barely had cell phones during that time. Flip phones, not even that yet.
Yeah.
And so social media wasn't around. You know what I'm saying? Your really way of knowing these writers was to write the lines and to just the buzz walking around, getting to know the city.
And for me, what it became eventually is that, you know, we all have names, and some of us share the same name. Like, how
Mhm.
many Lisas do you know? How many Sarahs do you know? How many Tonys do you know? You know, so we all have, in terms of our common name, but it was very similar to writing as well. You know, where some of us just had the same names and just may have not been familiar with one another at the time. You know,
Yeah.
whether it was a gap in between generations or happening simultaneously at the same time. But the key later on that I began to kind of start leaning on was not so much of, you know, us having the same name, but what you do with the name.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because, you know, like I ended up finding out that there was another artistic that was
Mhm.
actually writing artistic in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Oh, snap.
Right? You know, and he was a white guy too, by the way. You
Oh,
know,
snap.
and so, you know, I was just like, wow. But when I found out about him, I was just like, wow, we have both been already kind of writing for a period of time that it was just like, okay, you know, so but it was automatically a difference because I'm from Chicago, he's from Milwaukee. In fact, that I'm black, he white. So
Mhm.
it was that part helped, but then it was still like, what do you do with the name?
Yeah.
And because it's
Yep.
the mark that you make with the name is what's really gonna count.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. So okay, so let's go into. I'm gonna pull up the one that I have for you, Phina, and I want you to just talk a little bit about this for the audience because I feel like letters are obviously the ingredient of graffiti writing, right? But and some of us are fortunate enough to be able to be skilled at doing characters and background and whole compositions, but the true essence of writing graffiti is the lettering, right? That's really the
Yeah.
foundation and the formation of it. So, can you talk a little bit about this piece, Fina?
Yeah, I think that might have been last year, last MOS. And I'm not sure if that's a finished picture of it, but it definitely was. I like working with like colors and just like making my letters look kind of playful.
Okay.
And so that's why you see like the little spirals like around the H and like the two tones. And so um I also like painting characters. I have a character next to it as well.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I just like to. I feel like no pieces of like you don't see two pieces of mine that look exactly the same.
Hmm.
I really like messing around with my letters and changing them up and adding different colors, and I'm always experimenting for sure with my letters.
Yeah. 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 And I think that's the really cool part about the letters because, and that's what I became super fascinated with the letters because when you were in school learning how to write your alphabets, right? And learning how to say them, it was kind of boring. It got to the point to where it was once you knew it, it was just like, okay, whatever. I know my ABCs. I know how to write an A and a B and a C, but it was kind of boring. But with graffiti, it was just like it became a whole new awakening because it was just like I can give each letter its own personality. You know what I'm
Yep,
saying? I could wrap my A around my R and my R around my T. You know what I'm
yep,
saying? You throw those arrows on there, you give it 3D, you give it the unusual look from the basic plain letter A, letter B, letter C, and then when you throw the colors in there, that just makes it pop. So, it became this whole fascination of, and then if you were a wild style letter artist, it was just like, now can you even see my letters?
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, can you even read it? Because a lot of times people didn't like it because they couldn't read it.
Mhm.
Like, what does
Yep.
it say? I can't see what it says.
Right. Yeah. People are they're comfortable with they want to know what it is right away.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
instant
yeah,
gratification, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I used to be like, but the cool thing is that's what makes it unique and different. Like, I
Yep.
want to be able to sit there and be like, okay, let me see, where's the B? Ooh, I see the E.
Yep,
Like a
yep. That was the
puzzle.
fun part about it. Yeah,
Right.
for sure.
Where's the L?
Right. Right. Yeah.
you know And then once the eye got trained, you knew when you seen somebody's style who it was.
Yep,
Yeah.
You
yeah,
know what I'm
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. That's
yeah,
definitely part of like the game, right? Like learning people's style. Oh, I've seen your style. I've seen your tag. I've seen your style.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's yeah, definitely. But I don't know. That's why for me, it's always been like I can never just stick to one style though. Like I guess like my style is just like playful, you
yeah,
know. But it could like I feel like my pieces always look different.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's go. I'm gonna pull up some of your work, Belle. So really beautiful artwork, both of you actually. But like, I just want to kind of give the perspective of now. Is this the Albany walls?
The Walls of Grace on 36 and Albany. It's on
Yeah,
Albany.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
the
yeah,
Albany.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
Hmm.
yep, yep, yep. Yeah, one time this used to be the aerosol wall back in the early '90s.
Dang. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So then later it became yeah. So yeah, so yeah. So I'm very familiar with this wall. I painted this wall myself. But let's talk a little bit about what was this project like for you right here, Belle?
This was actually a jam my homeboy put together. Um, Shout out Hufu. They had put a jam together, and they had a lot of writers from Chicago. People were painting. They had Motic come from Mexico City or Mexico. I believe he's from Mexico City. I might be wrong, but painting alongside some really fresh writers, man, and trying to get down as hard as they were, because there was a lot of like a lot of top styles on that wall. So just trying to bring my own weight, and
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I like the colors. You know what I'm saying? Color combinations, and not everybody can work well with a variety of colors and make the colors look good on the wall inside of their piece and around the piece.
Thanks. Yeah, these were a lot of times I end up just hauling a bunch of crates from like previous walls and stuff like that. So sometimes I end up repeating a lot of my colors. I feel like green and blues are something I tend to use a lot. But in this case, I happen to have some purples, and I think the purples worked out really nice.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. So here's another one. Now, where is this one located?
This is actually at our spot over by we call it the county walls,
Okay.
which is where we host Splash at.
Okay.
But part of the walls are also some of these corrugated fences that we
Yeah.
have.
Uh huh.
And so, as being hosts of Splash, we try and like give the girls the better spaces and whatnot. And I think honestly, all the spaces are pretty dope. Even the corrugated fences, you could get some nice fresh stuff. So this is one of those spots. This is
Yeah.
actually the door to the middle of that fence, and um, I love it. It challenges your can control, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's dope. Sometimes you tell people their spots, and they get a little discouraged, but we always show them like, honestly, it's not as bad as it looks. So
Yeah.
people that have painted it have been pretty happy with it, regardless. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, this is right there on 26th in Sacramento, right behind the county.
Okay. And
Yep.
it's always been something about adding arrows to your letters. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
and like because it just gives again each letter has its own personality, but then when you add little extra bits and pieces to it, it just gives its own swag, its own
yeah.
vibe. You know what I'm saying?
The infamous arrow. Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
that's a huge part of just like graph and style and
Mhm.
wild style.
Yeah. Yeah. Now here's one that I really like. This is nice. This is really, what I'm saying it's colorful. And I used to always like to do colors that most people didn't like to use.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because not a lot of people will be using that color scheme, so it
Yeah,
makes your
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
stand out.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but this was a super dope jam too. This was like actually another all girl jam, out in Tulsa, hosted by my homegirl Mist, and this one was called Queens of Style. And I actually painted this production with Steph, and I think we had painted. She painted a I forgot who, Cher maybe. She painted Cher in the middle. But yeah, this piece was fun. It was really dope to get to meet other women painting from all sorts of California, Tulsa, Fresno. It was a really dope jam. More females that get down, and yeah, super dope vibes. So that was a
Okay.
fun piece for sure.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about Splash. So I want to know, like, what led you women to come up with the idea to do this event for other women?
You wanna?
Well, like I said, I had just came out of like I had been raising my kids. I had told Belle, once my youngest gets a little older, I'm gonna get back out there. And so right around that time, it was around that time when we went to paint I Still Love Her. And I was really impressed with how many females were out there painting because, like I said, I came from the '90s too, and so um, like you said, I had gone, I had taken a little break. And so when I came back, it was like, holy shit, like this is really starting to like take fire, And so I was really, really like adamant of like, we had just like lucked out on getting this wall at the county. It's right, behind the county. That's why we call it the county wall.
Yeah.
But so we had just lucked out. And hold on, Moose, come here. Come here. We had just lucked out, and we were like, you know what? These walls are huge. It'd be dope if we hosted a jam and made it like an annual thing, and just. But we didn't think it was gonna blow up the way it blew up. We were just like, yeah, we'll just get our homegirls and start. Like we'll paint this wall, do a production. We'll call it Splash. I don't even know how we came up with Splash. It was just a fun name. Yeah, like, well, it is a movie, but it has nothing to do with craft. So like, I think it was just like it was just a name that sounded fun, and it would like kind of like stick, So and colors Splash, So I just thought that it would be a dope name, and yeah, we were like, all right, let's do it. We did it, and let's do it again next year. We did it again, and like just year after year, we just started noticing like how many more girls were like hitting us up and just like, hey, are you guys gonna do Splash this year? So it kind of became a thing where it was like we started it, but like the need and the want and the like the hunger for it was there for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what year do you recall? What year you all started the first one?
Was it 2015?
It was 13, I
Oh
believe.
shit, 2013.
2013.
2013.
Okay. 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 And you all still are currently doing it, right?
We've done it. We're on our this. We're still contemplating if we're gonna run it this year. We
Okay.
couldn't pull it together last year.
Okay.
Just financially, we kind of do it, and we hosted a lot of girls. It got a little hefty, so we kind of needed to take a little break.
Okay.
But I mean,
Well, the thing is that we've kind of like we spoil the girls. We like to splurge on the girls, and so like we started off with like 9 girls, and we'd get them paint, and we'd get them little like goodie bags with like you know markers and whatever, like just little like goodie bags for them. And so we started off like that, and every year we were like, well, we can't stop doing that, so we just kept doing it and doing it. But it was definitely all coming out of our pockets, and
Yeah.
you know after a while, like it just kept growing. I think the last one we had was at 26 to 30 girls. So we had to take a step back because we have to reevaluate how we're gonna do this moving on, because it is getting a little hectic for us doing it all on our own, and just it's coming out of our pocket. And we've definitely had donations and people helping, but the majority of like the girls paint and like their goodie bags and their food, it mostly comes from us. I think one year we had Comales, one of the
for our 10th
restaurants.
annual, we did have a Comales sponsor, some food for the girls. And then we always got our awesome DJ Greedy in the mix.
Yeah.
You know, he's always dope, always comes through.
Yeah, he's been mixing for us every year since we started, and he will not have it any other way.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, yeah, that's really when you get to doing productional events that's happening annual. You know, yeah, obviously at some point it's definitely going to be growing in terms of numbers in the community,
Yeah.
and that's when it would definitely call for sponsors. You
Yeah.
know, because you just can't handle the expenses out of your own pockets
Right.
as it grows. But
Yeah.
if it's a community event, you know what I'm saying, and it's a safe and well put together event, then you know once you create that vibe of safety, you know, and growth and development, people, sure, people are definitely be interested in becoming a sponsor. You know what I'm saying? Because I mean, you know, when you think about it, like when we was doing the '90s, the CTA was basically that's how all of us got to paint because they were our sponsor. You know what I'm saying? Like literally, you know, however you look at it, that was how we got all of what we got. We didn't pay for
Right.
none of that paint. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So all the paint was supplied and the wall space, you know, legally. So, you know, CTA was, you know, literally a sponsor for us back then. And I don't even know if people even thought about it like that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But we literally had brand new boxes of paint that was distributed to each crew. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
that was like unheard of at that time.
Right. Especially coming from CTA.
Yeah.
So that's
Like, hell yeah. Run that.
stick it to the man.
Right.
So and even like right now, you know, you got people like my man Teal from MUL crew, you know, and the events that he do, you know, where he basically is a sponsor and help put this graffiti battle together, and you know, and it's a competitive battle, but you know, the winner can win monetary value and paint value, because he himself is a sponsor, but then anybody else that participates as a sponsor, that's how the monies become available to put forth into the event. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah, we've definitely been trying to do a little bit more reaching out within the community as well, and just trying to source out different help. You know, different people that are good at different things that are willing to maybe share some pointers or help us out in some ways. So
yeah,
we are trying to figure out how to try and keep it going. You know, it's a really wonderful time to be out there. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you know, we would definitely like, and this is what I want to make sure that you all are aware of too, if you don't already know, that we would definitely like to have that story be a part of the Chicago Hip Hop Heritage Museum. And I'm talking about the body of work that you women already have done to be housed in the museum. So from the year you started up until where we at today, you know, so that we can share those experiences, pictures, video, just to just share the concept. Just like I Still Love Her,
yeah,
you know, like with
yeah,
Gemstar, she brought like the whole collection of all
Yeah,
the.
that would be dope to really like have that like in display, because we see it like on our phones, and we see,
Yeah, yeah,
we
yeah, yeah,
see like the memories pop up,
right.
oh, look
yeah,
at this was 2015, oh, look at this.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
it'd
yeah,
be dope to see it all in one place and see
yeah,
like the gradual yeah, the timeline and the growth and
yeah,
how big it's
yeah.
gotten for sure.
Because here's the thing, hip hop now has become a
Mhm.
part of institutions, right?
Yep.
And what I mean by that is now it's being taught to
Yeah.
other people, up and coming generations, and just people in the world in general. And with that being said, that means that all of what we've done is important. But if we're not making it available to the public to know what it is we done, then it's almost like we don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know we done what we done, but
Right.
it has to be put out to the world to know it, right?
Yeah.
So think about, because graffiti would have never became the international phenomenon that it has become if people like Henry Chiffon and Martha Cooper,
Right.
who were well-known photographers back in the
Mhm.
70s and 80s, if they hadn't have done what they did in terms of documenting the
Yeah.
subway art, it would have not traveled as quickly as it did around the world.
Yeah,
You,
it's
you,
crazy. It's
you,
crazy how they were doing that, and they were like really like pioneers for sure in that
mhm.
scene.
Yeah,
Yeah, they definitely dove in and just like
yeah,
submerged themselves in the culture. That it was dope
yeah,
to see all
yeah.
those pictures and
And both of them still to this day are running exhibits all around the world.
yep, yeah.
Showcasing their photography work.
They
You
definitely
know.
helped spread the love for
hmm
graph for sure.
I went to now Henry has been doing this for some years, but I only got a chance to go to see one of his exhibits, which was back in 2020. Me and my wife went to New York, and he had an exhibit on display up in the Bronx, and it was covering trains. And he had some walls and some breakdancing photographs there. But the highlight was the trains, right? Because he documented them so well, right? And he had the trains from 1975 all the way. So it was a 10-year gamut of documentation from 1975 to 1985. And I'm talking about he had hundreds of images, whole car, top to bottom cars, right? And if you did a whole car, you wasn't nothing to be messed with, right? Because
Right.
like New York trains are longer than Chicago trains. Like I don't know if you ladies have ever
I
been to
guess
New
I
York.
didn't realize that.
Yeah, yeah. So like in Chicago, we have 2 sets of doors on our trains, right?
Right.
New York got 3 sets,
Oh, snap.
right? Yeah, so their trains are a little longer. And so, but they were doing whole cars top to bottom, and Henry was documenting those trains. And what was so fascinating is the pictures that he had to take them in a way to where he could piece the pictures together to
Yeah,
create.
because they were huge. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he became the man in the community because none of the writers were really professional photographers. So
Right.
because Henry had all their pictures of their work, they became great friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we got to go down and
Yeah. That's what I mean. He submerged. They submerged themselves. Like, yeah, they were part of the posse.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, we got to go down to Henry's studio and check out the new pictures. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
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 And unfortunately, I wish we had someone like a Henry here in Chicago to do the
Yeah.
same thing,
Yeah, man.
because we just didn't have it documented. Like some of us took pictures, but obviously some of us lost. Most of us lost a lot of the stuff that we did take. But Henry was a professional photographer, and in fact, that really changed his whole career. He wasn't really coming to New York to document subway graffiti, but that's what it became, and it really changed the trajectory of his whole career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do think that it's important as we move forward that we think about our projects, in terms of what we're doing in connection to our art form and this whole hip hop culture, in terms of making it available and accessible to the other people outside of our circles. You know what I'm saying? So when you look 20, 30 years, when you look back 20, 30 years from now, you have a trail. You know what I'm saying? You have that trail that you can leave behind versus, well, I remember somebody was doing something, but I have no record of it.
Right.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that's how history gets rewritten, because
Yeah.
when records are not clear and available, somebody else can come along and say they started the county walls and rewrite y'all out of history. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That's true. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, so so I just try to make sure people are aware of what you're doing and how important it is to make sure that it's accessible to people, because that's been the challenge with Chicago in general. Like Chicago has always been overlooked for various reasons, and one in particular is that we're not taking the initiative in so many ways to make sure that what we do in our projects not only are great projects, but the projects have become solidified and available. Like
Yeah.
you ever had like a book? Like I remember when bookstores were popular, right? And one of the things that I always hated, because when Subway Art, the book, have y'all ever seen Subway Art, the book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when that book came out in 1984, it was like a Bible for a lot of us, right? And then they turned around and released another book in 1987 called Subway Art, right? Now, you couldn't get the book online back then, right? You had to go to the bookstore to get the book, right? And then in some cases, you could order the book if they was out of stock. But then it got to the point where they started making books go what they call out of print. It's no longer available.
Yeah.
And my thing is something so, especially for collectors, that's the last thing you want to hear is it's not available anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, what?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. You want to push that out to the masses.
Yeah. And even though Henry said that, they had a heart because they had to they had to leave America to even get the book deal because no company in America even wanted to publish the book because it was all about illegal graffiti.
Vandalism.
Yeah. So when they got the book deal outside of America, in one interview, Henry says he was like, the book became very popular, even though he said majority of the places it was stolen. It was the number one book stolen.
She got racked up. Yeah.
If you ain't got money for spray paint, you ain't got no money for a book.
But that book circulated the world. Anybody that was into graffiti, if you ain't never heard of Subway Art, I don't know what you was doing.
Right. Oh man.
So
but I really appreciate you taking interest in what we've been doing and like just like you said, putting it out there and recording it and just putting it in the books because we've got our little like archive of stuff, but this is more for the public. This is definitely stretching it out beyond our neighborhood and out into everybody else's home. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
No, you're welcome. And the thing is that I feel like everybody should get credit for what they did. I really hate seeing somebody steal somebody else's credit. Right? Like, I did that. No, you really didn't. Yeah, that was them. And people do it all the time,
for sure.
They do it all the time, and I have become very protective of that, especially if I'm aware of it. Like I'll tell people in a minute, no, that's not you. That's theirs.
Dope.
You can't do that. You just can't. And because I feel like it's our responsibility.
Yeah.
Because we have not really been in a position to make sure that people don't do this. So because it's kind of like a vulnerable space for us here in Chicago, people feel that they can come and take from Chicago and go back and claim it as theirs.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
In whatever field it is, right? Like it's people going around talking about that they created house music. House music didn't start in Chicago.
What?
Like, huh? Are you kidding me?
Right. I've heard about that. I've heard about that.
Right. Don't come for our house music. We'll fight.
Yeah. So we have to make sure we own what belongs to us. We hold tight to it, and we make sure that we have the ownership to it. Because again, at the end of the day, that's what the receipts is all about. When you can pull up. After a while, when we were painting, we got to the point where we was like, I got to bring my camera because sometimes if you didn't take a picture that night, you probably was not going to see that train ever again, right? So you had to make sure you got a documentation of it right then, because the next day it's going to be probably gone.
That was the worst.
Yeah.
And
showing up and it's brown. The whole plot.
Or thinking you got the picture and then going to develop it.
So it's just important. And so I just want to definitely commend you ladies for the work you've done. I'm looking forward to meeting both of you all in, formally in person, because Belle just brought it to my attention that we met some years ago, and I would have never even knew it if she didn't bring it to my attention,
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you too.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. And The other thing is, real quickly, we're getting close to the women's exhibition at the Chicago Hip Hop Heritage Museum. So that's going to kick off July 1st. So as I mentioned to you all, we are building a wall in the back of the museum.
Dope,
And
yeah.
so, which is going to be an 8-foot high wall. And
Nice.
it's going to be about 40 to 50 feet wide.
Oh, nice.
Hell yeah.
But here's the thing: it's going to be, this wall is going to belong to us because it's going to be a removable wall.
Oh, okay.
So in other words, we're using the cylinder blocks.
Yeah.
But we're not putting the mortar in between them.
Oh,
So
it's gonna pull apart.
Yes.
Oh.
And the reason why is because we're planning on relocating in the next couple years, maybe two years or so, the museum, because we're going into a bigger space.
Okay, congrats.
Thank you. And what we're hoping to do eventually is to get to where we can have a wall that is, what we got right now, but where we can actually build it with the mortar in between, where it can be solid, and then it belongs to us, right?
Hey.
You know what I'm saying? It's
Dope.
not no company's wall, it's our wall.
Dope.
Yeah. So that's in the works, but we want to make sure that everybody, in terms of whatever element they practice, like we're gonna have a lineup cipher of women DJs, women dancers, obviously the women that's going to be painting the wall, so the artists, and then the MCs too. So it's going to be time for all the women to shine throughout the month of July. Plus, it's for the record, for people that don't know, July is Hip Hop Heritage Month here in Chicago. And so that's another thing. We actually had a proposal drafted up. People like Amina and some of her people on her team that actually made that possible and went down to City Hall.
Nice.
And made it officially a record at City Hall that in July every year in July is in Chicago is Hip Hop Heritage Month.
That's dope.
That's awesome. I love that, man.
Yeah.
That's super fresh.
So we will be talking more in detail, and if you all can get whatever you can get between now and before July 1st to kind of drop off at the museum. So
I'm sorry.
Sorry, we got interrupted.
Okay. So, no, I was saying whatever you can get between now and before July 1st, like pictures, any original artwork, anything that you feel that will help tell your story and what you've done to kind of bring down to the museum, it would definitely be appreciated.
Oh, we have a lot.
Yeah.
We have a lot of stuff for sure.
Yeah. And so
we could even do like some of the teas that we sold. Like we have like teas.
Yeah, we made some teas. We got some posters too that we made.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe we'll bring like a little splash box or something or some stuff.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. That way, you all will be responsible for telling the splash story.
Cool.
All right, thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it.
By any chance, are you able to print out like the photos of that, or is it better, like as far as documenting splash and showcasing it?
Yes, if you need me to do that, I can do that because I do work for Staples.
Oh, okay.
I do. I am in position to have stuff printed. But if you can do it, that will save me some time because I do got a lot of people throwing stuff at me to get printed.
Yeah, gotcha. We can handle it.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you had like a fancy photo printer or something over there.
No,
like...
I used to have a print shop.
Dope. Okay.
I did used to have my own business, but it's tough when you are the business owner and you don't really get a lot of support.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you still got to pay the bills, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But we'll definitely get you some stuff for sure.
Yeah, and hopefully one day that won't be a problem because I feel like if we keep working together, eventually we can create a space to where we can all have some ownership and we can have the things that we need. Like I've always wanted a community center here in Chicago.
Oh man.
You know what I'm saying?
That would be amazing.
That would be dope.
That would just highlight and house all of the elements of the culture. And
my God.
Arts related, not only for adults, but for kids too.
Yo, let's get a board committee, or what do they call it?
Yeah.
Started.
Yeah, we definitely like including the kids all the time in Splash.
Yeah, we try to make sure we have a wall so that they can also get a little spray in. You can't be
Yeah.
around spray paint and not want to spray paint. Like,
Yes.
so we definitely try and get it in the little ones' hands as well.
That's what's up. That's what's up. So,
Yeah.
what would you all like to say in conclusion if you were speaking to any young and up and coming artists or anyone that was trying to become a writer or into the graffiti world? Excuse me. What would be your words of advice?
I think for me, it would be directly to like any young girl that's like trying to get in to see what graph is all like. Would be to make sure you can hold your own. Stand on your own 2 feet, bust your own tags, do your own piece, and get up
Okay.
and stay up.
Okay. I like that.
I would definitely just let them know that it's an evolution.
Mhm.
You know, you're not gonna like your stuff at first, but you'll come into your own and come up with your own stuff, and I mean, be original. Don't be, we used to say, don't be biting other styles. You could take a little from here and make it your own, but definitely definitely embrace what you have, and it's an evolution, and just keep on working.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. Thank you, women, for actually coming on here once again tonight. I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you, and we've just made history, by the way, if you did not know. You know what I'm saying? Because we've been talking for a whole hour and 22 minutes, and it's all, and look, and
What?
look, and it's all documented.
In the books.
So we're going to go ahead and conclude the show. But what I like for you all to do is just stay on so we can chop it up real briefly in the backstage area. But in the meantime, thank you. Share this with your friends and family and crewmates. And for all you out there watching, make sure you tune back in next Friday because we're going to have another special guest coming on next week. You know what I'm saying? So tune in to find out who that might be. But until then, continue to rep your city. We'll be at the museum tomorrow for those that want to drop off items for the up and coming exhibit for the women here in Chicago. So we'll be at the museum tomorrow from 12 to 5. And if you would like to arrange any other times or days throughout the week, you can just hit me up or anybody from the team at the museum, and we can try to make some arrangements to get your stuff in the doors.
Yeah.
So yeah. So thank you all so much. Was it what is I? But let me just say this: are y'all cool? Was this okay? Was it?
Yeah, this was awesome.
Yeah.
Artistic, you're such a great host.
Yeah, thank you. You definitely brought the relaxation.
Yes.
The
Yes,
zen.
the sun. No,
That's
this
what's
was
up.
great. Thank you so much again
Yeah.
for even like considering us. We haven't really done like a hip hop interview like this, like what about the elements, So this
Yeah.
was super. Just honored to be a part of it.
Definitely,
Honestly.
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for embracing us and
Yeah.
just giving us the props that a lot of people don't. So
Yeah.
really
No.
appreciate it, man.
Yeah. No, it always warms my heart to see the culture continue to grow and thrive.
Oh yeah.
And and again, especially with, like I say, more women being involved, what I'm saying, yeah, that just makes me happy. So if
Yes.
whatever I can do to create a space to let you all shine even more, it's good as done. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you. Thank you. Love that. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay, so hold tight. I'm gonna go ahead and conclude this, and then I'll be right back with you all.
Cool.
All right, thank you. Peace out.
Yes. So, everyone, thank you all for tuning in. This has been another episode of Rep Your City Fresh Fridays, and we will be back next Friday once again at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So keep it locked and loaded for the latest and the greatest news on hip hop culture in Chicago and around the globe. All right, y'all. We'll be back next week. My name is Artistic, and we out. Peace.